My grandmother's final request was for me to scatter her ashes in a specific river. I found out that's where her husband's first wife disappeared. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's all be internet friends. She made me promise. It was late, nearly midnight, and the nurses had already dimmed the hallway lights. I'd pulled the scratchy armchair close to the bed, the kind that rocks too much if you shift your weight, and I was just starting to drift when she grabbed my hand. Her grip was weak but deliberate. I looked up. "Scatter me in the Salter River," she whispered. Her voice had been almost gone for days, thinned by morphine and the slow fade of her lungs. But this came out clear, sharp enough to wake me fully. I blinked. The what? She closed her eyes slow, didn't repeat it, just nodded once like that was enough, like I'd know what it meant. "The Salter River," I said again softly. She exhaled, "the shallow kind. The kind you don't realize is the last one until there isn't another." I pressed the call button, but the quiet had already settled. Not panic, not shock, just finality. And her hand, still curled lightly around mine, as if waiting to make sure I'd keep my word. It wasn't a name I recognized. Salter River. It didn't mean anything to me, not like family homes or childhood lakes or the places Grandma used to talk about when she was feeling nostalgic. It didn't sound like summer or laughter or memory. It sounded distant. At the service, I asked my dad if we'd ever gone there. He shook his head without looking up. "Nope, never been." "Did she have family there?" "Not that I know of." He paused, thumb running over the edge of a photo. "Your grandpa grew up near that area, I think, but he never talked about it." I almost asked more, almost, but it was a strange day, thick with memories and casseroles. People bringing flowers and stories, trying to rewrite the ending into something softer than what really happened. So I just nodded, said, "Huh," and let it go, for the moment, but something about it stuck. Why there? Out of everywhere she could have chosen, why Salter? She never even mentioned that town, not until the last breath she used to say it. I booked a motel near the river, one night, nothing fancy. Just a cheap roadside place with a flickering ice machine and a bedspread older than I was. The kind of place that didn't ask questions when you walked in carrying an urn. It was a 3-hour drive. I brought flowers, a journal, and a thermos of coffee that went cold before I hit the county line. I didn't bring anyone else. This didn't feel like something to share. The Salter River was narrower than I expected. Quiet. Tree-lined on both sides, with slow bends that caught the sunlight just right. It didn't look like a place people remembered. It looked like a place people disappeared into. I parked near a public trailhead and walked until I found a spot that felt still. Not special, just still. A little cove tucked between some brush, low enough that I had to crouch. I sat on a rock, urn in my lap. Tried to feel something. Closure, maybe, peace, something cinematic. But mostly I just felt tired. She was gone, I was here, and this river still didn't mean anything to me. Not yet. The woman at the diner asked why I was in town. It was the kind of question people ask in small places, half politeness, half curiosity, like they're trying to guess before you answer. She wore a paper name tag that said Linda and had the kind of voice that made everything sound like gossip waiting to happen. I'd ordered eggs and coffee, nothing else. I looked like someone who hadn't slept much, which was true, and I didn't really feel like talking. But when she filled my cup the second time, she lingered. "Passing through?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just here to visit the river." Her eyebrows lifted a little. "Salter." I nodded, something shifted behind her smile. "You here for the story, or?" I blinked. "What story?" She hesitated, like she was weighing something. Then she leaned in, elbows on the counter like we were old friends. "That's where that woman went missing," she said, "back in the 70s. My stomach tightened. I didn't say anything. "Lillian Mary," she added, like the name itself carried a warning. I didn't recognize it. Not yet. But something about the way she said it, like it still echoed, made me finish my coffee faster than planned. She said the name like a warning. "Lillian Mary?" I heard it again in my head as I sat in the car, the urn still in the passenger seat like a silent passenger, the diner's coffee turning to acid in my stomach. I pulled out my phone, typed the name in with the town, just to see. There weren't many results. Just one real hit, A scanned clipping from an old newspaper with faded headlines and yellowing borders. Salter River still holds secrets, woman missing since 1973. No body, no witnesses. Just her car found parked near the riverbank, door locked, purse still on the seat. They called it a disappearance. Not a crime, not officially. There was a photo, black and white, grainy but clear enough. She was young. Soft hair a little over the shoulder. A polite smile, the kind women were taught to wear back then. No date on her birthday, just her age. 25. Something stuck in my throat. I read the article 3 times before I noticed the name at the bottom. Lillian Mary Carter. Carter, my last name. I stared at the screen, then looked at the urn, then back at the river. The water didn't move any differently, but everything else had. Lillian Mary was my grandfather's first wife, married at 22. Gone by 25. I sat in my car with the engine off, the obituary pulled up again on my phone, fingers hovering like I might tap the screen and make her reappear. Carter, it wasn't a common enough name to ignore. I called my mother. I didn't plan what I was going to say. Just hit the button and waited as it rang and rang. She picked up on the 4th, her voice groggy and confused. Hey, everything okay? Who was Lillian Mary? There was a pause, then a breath. Where did you hear that name? In Salter, I said, at the river. Silence again, then we don't talk about her. That line heavy, scripted. Like something she'd been taught to say, not something she understood. She was married to Grandpa. Yes, before Alois, a long time ago. What happened to her? Another pause, it was complicated. I didn't push, she wouldn't tell me more. I could hear it in her tone, the edges drawn tight, the door locked. My mother didn't know the full story, or she did and chose not to carry it. But I wasn't built for silence. I looked over at the urn in the passenger seat. My grandmother's ashes waiting for the river, and I couldn't shake the feeling she didn't choose this place for peace. She chose it for memory, for justice, for someone to finally look back. I didn't scatter the ashes. Not yet. I packed everything up. Urn, journal, the half-finished bouquet I'd brought out of obligation more than grief, and drove home with the windows down, trying to breathe something that didn't feel like secrets. The whole drive back, the same thought looped in my head. This can't be coincidence. The same river, the same family, a missing woman with our last name, and now a dying request to return to that place. When I got home, I placed the urn on the hallway table. Not hidden, not buried in a closet, right there, so I couldn't ignore it, so I wouldn't forget. That night, I pulled out the photo albums. The thick, dusty kind with laminated pages and curling corners. I flipped through page after page of birthdays, graduations, family vacations where Alois wore sunglasses too big for her face and smiled like someone who always knew more than she said. And tucked in the back, behind a faded Christmas card and a pressed wildflower, a photo I didn't recognize. A man and a woman standing by the water, not Alois, not my parents, not anyone I'd ever been introduced to. But the man was Grandpa. And the woman, hair just past the shoulder, polite smile, the same face from the article, Lillian. She had been part of the family once, until she wasn't. I stared at the photo for a long time, then I looked at the urn. And whispered, you knew. Grandma kept a box of Grandpa's things. It was one of those quiet family rules. The kind no one writes down but everyone obeys. Don't touch the cedar box. It sat in the attic closet, behind a folded quilt and an old suitcase full of baby clothes. Always there, always untouched. She told me once years ago, when I was still young enough to be curious and nosy, that it was just his old letters and bits of memory. She said it softly, with a little smile. But her eyes never left mine when she said, it's not for anyone else. After I found the photo, I went straight up there. The attic smelled like insulation and dust. I had to push a few things aside before I saw it, tucked behind an old lamp, the cedar box. Small, square, no lock, just a lid that creaked when I opened it. Inside were letters all rubber banded together. Yellowed envelopes, no stamps, some photos, a lighter, a broken watch. And at the very bottom, folded neatly between 2 sheets of wax paper, a newspaper clipping. I unfolded it with shaking hands. Lillian Mary Carter missing. Salter River, 1973. Same one from the internet, only this one had a corner torn, a coffee stain in the bottom right, and notes in the margins. Written in Grandma's handwriting. No body, no blood. Just vanished. Underlined twice. I looked at the date, then at the letters, then back at the urn still in the hallway downstairs. Alois hadn't forgotten Lillian. She'd been watching her. And she'd left this box behind like a fuse she knew I'd eventually light. One letter was from Lillian, and it was never sent. No envelope. Just folded paper, the kind that had been opened and closed too many times, creased soft and thin, like someone read it over and over again in silence. The handwriting was careful, neat, no mistakes, no crossouts, like she'd thought every word through before writing it, or like she didn't have the luxury of writing it twice. It started like this. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. My breath caught, she didn't write to anyone in particular. No dear at the top, just her voice, plain and direct. I don't know how to leave without making it worse. He doesn't hit. He doesn't yell, he just stops speaking. And when he does, the quiet feels like a trap. I didn't want to keep reading, but I couldn't stop. She talked about isolation, about how her friends stopped calling, about how her money somehow always disappeared right when she needed to leave, about the shed behind the house where he'd spend hours alone, about the nights he'd stand outside her bedroom door and just wait. I'm writing this down because I need proof, because if I disappear, they'll say I was sad, that I wandered off. But I wasn't sad, I was scared, I still am. The last line was scrawled, not like the rest. As if she wrote it fast, maybe right before folding the page. Please don't let him bury me where no one looks. I sat there holding her voice in my hands, nearly 50 years too late. And I realized something I hadn't before. Grandma hadn't just found the river, she'd inherited the silence, and left me the key to break it. There was another letter, this one in my grandmother's handwriting, not sealed, not folded for sending. A journal entry, scribbled on a loose sheet torn from the kind of leather notebook she used to keep in her purse for grocery lists and poems she never showed anyone. The date at the top was from 1984. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Sharp, elegant loops, confident even in grief. I found the necklace today, buried behind the shed. I know now, I know what he did. I stopped breathing. She didn't name him, she didn't have to. It was the same shed Lillian had written about. The same backyard, the same quiet monster. I read on. I asked him once, years ago, about the woman before me. He said she left in the night, that she wasn't built for the life he wanted. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. There was a pause in the page, a break in the ink. Then it picked up again, firmer. I've lived next to that river. I've stood at the edge of it with this man, and I think he took her there. I think the water keeps secrets better than people do. The final lines were barely legible, smudged. I won't tell anyone, not yet, but if I die first, I want someone to look. I want the truth to breathe again. Let her name be spoken, let her be found. She signed it with her initials. EC, not even her full name, just enough to make it clear that she wanted me to carry this further. She didn't scream, she didn't confront him. She planned. He died years ago, quietly, in his sleep. No drama, no illness anyone talked about. Just gone one morning in the middle of winter, his last breath barely noticed. Grandma buried him with the rest of the family. No hesitation, no spectacle. I was in college when it happened. I remember the phone call, the short obituary, the way she kept her hands folded during the service like she was holding something in. Now I knew what it was. She never told anyone, not my mom, not my aunt, not the sheriff. She didn't scream the way some women do when they finally have proof. She didn't try to burn it all down. She kept it. Because she knew no one would listen. A man dies in his bed with a clean name and a quiet history, and no one goes digging. Especially not for the woman who vanished before half the town was even born. But Grandma didn't let it rot in the ground. She left a trail, one letter, one journal entry, one photo, one name whispered in the dark before her last breath. Scatter me in the Salter River, not for peace, not for sentiment, for memory, for a truth that wouldn't fit in her coffin. So I took the box, and I called someone. I called the sheriff's department. Got a woman on the line who sounded too young to remember rotary phones, let alone a cold case from 1973. Her voice was polite but bored, like she was already halfway through whatever form she had to fill out. I told her I had information about a disappearance. She asked for the name. Lillian Mary Carter. Pause a few keystrokes, then. Hold on. A minute later, she came back with the same tone, measured, skeptical. That case was never closed, technically, but there's not much to go on. Why are you asking? I have letters, I said, from her and from someone who found something. Evidence. That made her sit up a little. I heard the shift in her voice. Still guarded, but now she was listening. Can you bring them in? I'm not local, I said. I was in town for a personal reason. I have the documents with me. She asked if I could scan them, email them, send copies. I said yes. She gave me an address, said someone would look into it. That was the phrase that stuck with me. Look into it, like a drawer, like a box. Like a favor they might get to if the pile wasn't too high. But Lillian was never in a drawer. And she wasn't in that river by accident. So I hung up, saved the contact, and promised myself one thing. If they didn't look hard enough, I would. I went back to the river alone. No motel this time. No coffee, no journal, just the box. And the urn. The sun was lower than before, sharper somehow, like it had less to prove. The trees were still. The water looked the same, slow and heavy and unbothered by the weight people kept throwing into it. I stood at the edge of the same cove, the one I'd found by accident, the one that now felt like a name without needing one. I opened the urn. The ashes didn't look like much. They never do. They don't carry voice or memory or warning. They just sit in the wind and wait. I held the box in the other hand. Letters, clippings, pieces of 2 lives lived under the same shadow. Then I knelt. Not to pray, not to cry, to choose. I scattered half. Let the wind take it. Let the water carry it downstream where the current could speak for her better than I could. The rest I kept sealed, because she hadn't asked me to disappear her. She asked me to remember. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my knees, and whispered toward the water. I know now I see you. And for a moment, I swear the river paused, just long enough to listen. The other half went into a jar, not the urn. Not some sentimental keepsake. A clean glass jar, thick-lidded, airtight, sterile. I wrapped it in cloth, packed it carefully, and placed it inside a fireproof safe I bought that same afternoon. The kind you bolt to the floor. The kind no one opens without intention. I labeled it with a single word, evidence, not out of disrespect, not as a threat, as a record, because the rest of her ashes weren't for closure. They weren't for wind or water or goodbye. They were for truth, for leverage. For a world that only listens when you show it something real, something it can't delete with disbelief. I didn't tell anyone, not my mom, not my sister, not the woman at the diner or the girl at the sheriff's office who promised to look into it. That half wasn't for them. It was for whatever came next. And it sat there in the dark of that safe like a match waiting for a hand. I posted the letters anonymously. Scanned every page, cleaned up the creases, blurred the handwriting just enough to make it readable but still real. Left off names. No return address. Just the truth, typed out in black and white and packaged like a whisper someone had finally dared to speak aloud. I sent it to every local news station. Not the big ones, just the kind that still answer phones. The kind that cover lost dogs and zoning meetings and missing people who never made the evening broadcast. Subject line, New lead Salter River cold case, Lillian Mary Carter. I didn't sign it, didn't need to. The words spoke for themselves. Lillian's words, Aloyse's notes, the photo of the necklace, the newspaper clipping with the margin scribbles, and the final scanned image, the journal page that read, I found the necklace today. I know what he did. Within 48 hours, the story broke. Salter River cold case may have new lead. They didn't mention me. Just a teepster, a long-forgotten case, a man who was never a suspect because no one asked the right questions, and a river that might not be done talking yet. My aunt called crying. She didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was. Just started in mid-breath like the words had been building in her throat for days. I saw the article. Her voice cracked hard on the second word. I stayed quiet, let her get to it on her own. Why didn't anyone tell us? I closed my eyes. Not from guilt, just from the weight of knowing how deep the silence had gone. Because, I said, they were never supposed to. She exhaled, long, shaky. It's her, isn't it, the first wife, Lillian? I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Yes. A pause, then softer. Mom knew. She left the letters. She wanted someone to look. There was another silence, heavier this time. A grieving that didn't know where to land. I waited for her to hang up, to yell, to say it couldn't be true, but she didn't. She whispered, I always wondered why she never let us talk about him after he died. And in that moment, I realized something. My grandmother hadn't been the only one living in his shadow. She was just the only one who'd found the light. I spoke to a retired investigator. Found his name in one of the older articles about Lillian, buried in the middle, just a quote about unresolved questions and lack of physical evidence. I tracked him down through an alumni database and cold-called a number I wasn't sure even worked. It did. His voice was gravel when he picked up. Suspicious at first, then cautiously curious once I said the name. Lillian Mary Carter. A long pause, then, haven't heard that one in a while. I told him I wasn't law enforcement. Just family. I didn't say which side, not at first. I told him there were letters, documents, things that had never been shared. He asked if there was a will. No, I said, just intention. He didn't laugh, didn't question my motives. He asked me to send everything I had. I always thought something was wrong, he said quietly. The way it ended, the river, the car, the timing, no note, no struggle, no follow-up. We didn't have the resources back then. He cleared his throat, but that man, he didn't feel right. I said he was my grandfather. He paused, then said, then I'm sorry for what you had to find. But I wasn't, not anymore. Because someone finally said it out loud. It didn't feel right. And now someone was listening. The river isn't just water now, it's memory, evidence. A ledger that refused to rot. Every ripple feels like a name spoken low, every bend of breath held too long. I stood at its edge months later, hands in my pockets, the air colder than before. There's a plaque now, not big, not flashy. Just a flat stone mounted near the trailhead. It reads, in memory of Lillian Mary Carter, 1948-1973. Still missed, still seen, I didn't put it there. The county did, or maybe the town. Someone with just enough pull to make it real. I never asked. I didn't want credit, just permanence. There were flowers tucked beneath it, faded lilies wrapped in grocery store plastic. A small photo of her, copied from the article, slipped under a rock to keep it from blowing away. And a note in uneven handwriting, I never forgot you. I stood there until the sun dropped behind the trees and the shadows thickened. No ceremony, no speech, just a moment of quiet where silence didn't feel like a lie anymore, because now the river talks, and someone finally answered. Months had passed, long enough for inboxes to quiet and headlines to fade, but not long enough to forget. Not for me, not for the people who'd been waiting decades for someone to say her name out loud again. I drove back to Salter on a gray afternoon, windshield wipers dragging slow across the glass. This time I wasn't carrying an urn, or a box, or a question. I was just going to see her. The trailhead looked the same, muddy, narrow, half-swallowed by trees. But at the bend where the bank dipped low and the water stilled, something was new. A plaque, simple, flat, bolted into stone near the roots of a tree that had probably been growing since before Lillian vanished. It read, in memory of, Lillian Mary Carter, 1948-1973. Still missed. Still seen, no explanation. No headline, just truth quietly placed. There were flowers beneath it, fresh ones, wild-picked, bound with twine. And beside them, a note sealed in a sandwich bag, weighed down with a stone, I never forgot you. I stood there for a long time, didn't cry, didn't smile, just breathed. Because this was what my grandmother wanted. Not revenge, not attention. Just this, for Lillian to be named, for someone to come back. For the river to stop swallowing everything. My grandmother didn't scream, she planned. That thought stayed with me as I sat at my kitchen table, the old journal open in front of me, pen in hand. No music, no distractions. Just the weight of what she'd carried and what she'd passed on. She could have turned him in, confronted him, burned the box, left the past buried like everyone else did, but she didn't. She waited, documented. Left breadcrumbs in case the wrong story got told again. She trusted that someone, me, would pick them up, not out of vengeance, but out of duty. because she'd seen what silence could do, how it erases, how it shelters. And she wasn't willing to let the truth rot with her. So I wrote, one line, clean and final, beneath all the others in my notebook. She died holding the truth, but she handed it to me on the way out, and I'm not letting it go. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.